The Flow Friday Night Sports Show continuing on. We move away from women's sport now to a sport that is certainly played by a number of women these days. We've got women's baseball competitions popping up all over the place, Ellis, and baseball's big in this country.
Yeah, well, we'd like to see it one day get to a similar level as to the kind of interest it garners over in the States, but still a bit of growing to do, but very positive signs.
Well, the ABL is certainly growing in interest in the States as well, and Dave Penrose from Baseball Australia joins us on the line right now. Dave, how are you, mate?
Yeah, very well, thank you.
Interesting story on the homepage of ABL.com as well, and Ellis is working beautifully today, looking at the US homes really taking on board the ABL. It looks like it's fairly popular over there.
Yeah, it certainly is. And I mean, it always has been, obviously, with Major League Baseball coming in and being the majority stakeholder in the league when it relaunched back in 2010. But you know, obviously, the US fans, they just love their baseball and seeing their prospects come down here, you know, that next crop of talent coming through, they're all eyes on watching to see who's progressing and developing as they would like them to be so that they can crack into their main team. So it's been a really strong season for US interest.
Now, Ellis, I know you've got some interest in the ownership model of some of the ABL clubs. We were talking about this the other day, and the Adelaide Crows, of course, have a big stake in the Adelaide Giants. But I know you've got a couple of questions you wanted to ask Dave about that.
Yeah, look, it's not really a topic that's often thrust into the limelight, so I'm just interested, Dave, is there the potential that we'll see other clubs around the league mirroring the relationship that we have between the Adelaide Crows, obviously being the parent company of the Giants here in Adelaide?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I mean, probably when we went to the private ownership model a few years ago, we were open for business, and it remains much the same. Obviously, the 8 teams that are in the league at the moment have their ownership groups, so they're well set. But in terms of expansion, there's definitely opportunities for the league to expand into some of the other cities or regional spaces and have similar model to what Crows have with the Adelaide Giants in South Australia, but also with Geelong Korea, who obviously didn't take part in the league this year, but with their ownership group over in Korea, there's been interest in the past from Japan, teams in Japan and also Taiwan to have a similar model to that. So it's through going to private ownership, we've had that pretty flexible outset, look that we can take with different teams, depending on who the owners are to make it work for them.
It's been an interesting season all round in the ABL, but the season is over. Melbourne are the champions, and players are slowly starting to return to club baseball. Now, we know that there's been a few in quarantine out of the Melbourne hub, which is where the finals were played. So I think there's quite a few players. I think that might be returning to their clubs this weekend, Dave.
They should be, yeah. So they should be. I know I hit my 14 days yesterday. Not that I had to do the quarantine, but I had to do the testing. So They should be out by today or tomorrow, depending on when they got out. I think one team did get out a little bit earlier. So it should be back into action from Sunday.
Dave, we've seen a number of industries across Australia almost benefit in a way through the rest of the world being so badly impacted by COVID. Is there any potential for some big-name players in the baseball code to venture down under if we continue to see sport so heavily disrupted overseas?
Yeah, I think we definitely saw that even with this ABL season. Potentially guys that would have gone and played in some of the other winter leagues ended up down in Australia. And that was despite the fact that we had the stricter quarantine rules in terms of having to do the 14 days leading into it upon arrival from overseas. But ultimately on the other side of that, a lot safer destination with COVID far better under control. So it's definitely, obviously, who knows what will happen next with COVID, but it's definitely one that we've already seen reap some of the benefits of. Sure.
Now, Dave, let's talk about club baseball now in Melbourne and Adelaide, because that's where a lot of players are heading back to from the ABL. But there's also other competitions going on in regional areas, some parts of our Flow network, and we'll get to that a little bit later on. But in Melbourne, what's the situation there? Because they've had a pretty disrupted season already with COVID.
Yeah, they certainly have. So they were the latest to start out of all of the state leagues, obviously with Victoria still in their lockdown, at the tail end of last year. So they started late and they'll end up playing the aim was a 16-round season, and obviously they've missed a couple of weeks again with their most recent lockdown, earlier this month. So there are a few games out from finals. They have 3 more to come before they head into finals, and it's been a pretty close race, obviously with fewer games to create that lead and spread out the competition. It's a very tightly fought one at the moment.
In Adelaide, the situation there, they're 27 to 28 games in. I think they're playing 32 this year, so finals are right on the doorstep there.
Yes, and that, speaking of fiercely contested, it's another one that's really tight at the top. So there's 4 teams, and Henley and Grange are just on top on premiership points, followed by Sturt and then Goodwood and West Torrens, and they're all split by effectively a win, I think it is. So, it's a sneaky chance that there could be 3 teams that finish that regular season all tied up the way it's going and go down to a few tiebreakers. So the Baseball SRA office would be working overtime with the calculator and working out those what could happen there. So really going to be an interesting race to the finish line.
Just before we go, Alice, I want to bring you in on this. I mentioned in some parts of the Flow Network we got finals going on for baseball competitions in country areas, and let us know via our email address, news@flowfm.com.au, if your baseball comp is wrapping up. My old hometown of Port Lincoln, Alice, the Indians Baseball Club over there are playing a grand final on Friday night. Their 11th consecutive A-grade grand final. How about that?
How about that? I didn't even know they knew what baseball was out in Lincoln. But
absolutely they do.
Well on top of it.
In fact, Dave Penrose, you can check this out. It might be some sort of record. I believe they've got 3 grades over there in Port Lincoln, and I'm pretty sure the Indians Baseball Club now, over the last 11 completed seasons, bearing in mind 2020 didn't get completed, I think now they have played in every grand final in every grade of the last 11 years.
Yeah, right. Well, you've given me a question without notice, so I wasn't expecting that one, but I'm trying to think quickly in the back of my mind. There's no teams that I can think of in other competitions around the country that have been quite that dominant for such a sustained period of time. So
well, there's only 4 teams in the comp, so we probably should move on, Dave. One thing I will say as we wrap up, Nathan Davidson, we talked about guys who are caught in a lockdown. Unfortunately, Nathan, this is how committed these guys are to the ABL. Nathan, obviously running the Adelaide Giants and coming back, having to go into lockdown, missed the 90-year Glenelg anniversary party on Saturday night, and of course the 20-year premiership reunion. So his presence was missed at the show, but we all understand why he wasn't there.
Yes, yeah, no, definitely was affected by that one. He's taken it very well, though. He's enjoying the downtime. But how was that night anyway? It was good?
It was a super night there at the Highway Hotel on Anzac Highway, and a few of the boys, I think, would still be suffering from sore headitis, I reckon. But that's a topic for another day, boys.
Brilliant. Well worth celebrating that one.
May have overindulged. But we'll leave it there. Dave Penrose from Baseball Australia, great chatting with you. Look forward to doing it again next week.
Look forward to it.